Aloha, my name is Anna Covert, and I'm coming to you from my battleship here on the beautiful island of Oahu. This week on the Covert Code, the topic is faith, finance, and strategy, leading with purpose. And my special guest is Reverend Kevin T. Taylor, a faith-driven executive, author of A Charge to Keep, pastor, and coach for mission-driven executives. With over 2 decades of experience in education, organizational, nonprofit success, and growth, Kevin blends what I'll call purpose with performance to create truly lasting impact for those that he serves. Thanks so much for being here today, Kevin.
Thank you, Anna. I'm very happy to be here, and hello to all of your guests.
Wonderful. So let's kick it off. Tell me a little bit about your professional journey. You are so interesting. You do so many things. Tell us your Cliff Note version.
Yes, so I have worked in both corporate and nonprofits. I've worked also as a pastor now or in the ministry now for almost 30 years. But my professional journey began in the corporate arena. I was able to parlay my finance background into the education space where I worked in the charter school sector. And so I spent 10 and a half years in that sector, rose from a director of finance to be a CEO of a charter school network in Massachusetts, one that had been unionized before I joined, and but I was able to negotiate with that union and reached a skinny agreement, so to speak. From there, I moved into clean energy, and in those roles, I was the CFO as well as the interim CEO of North America's largest incubator of climate tech startups. And most recently, I was the chief finance and talent officer for a nonprofit here in Connecticut. And so my experience spans the gamut, but my book draws on both my pastoral experience as well as my C-suite experience. And so that's why the subtitle of A Charge to Keep is Immutable Leadership Lessons from the C-suite to the pulpit.
Wow. We have a lot of things in common. I went to college in Boston,
Right.
Massachusetts. Yeah. So I just here for a couple of years, but big believer or I have a lot of clients in the clean energy space and actually just wrote my second book, which I released at RE Plus, which is the largest renewable energy conference called The Solar Coaster. So that's very exciting. So and you became your pastor. What do you preach about?
So I am I'm ordained in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. African Methodism is the oldest Black denomination in America, and we are part of the Methodist family of churches. With the Episcopal part of our name simply refers to our governance structure, and so we are open to all. And if you were to come to Israel AME Church on a Sunday, you would hear a prophetic message that centers around the Bible and whatever story, whatever lesson we are learning. And you would also be a part of a movement to be able to change lives. So I believe that it's important for us not just to talk about it, but to be about it. And so if you come to our church, we are focused not just on what's happening in the news, but we are writing to our elected officials, letting them know where we stand on issues. So Israel AME Church is the oldest Black church in upstate New York. It was a stop on the Underground Railroad. Frederick Douglass preached from the pulpit. Harriet Tubman was, hid in our basement. And so we are a historic church. And so it is my duty as the pastor, as we get ready to celebrate 200 years in 2028, it is my duty to ensure that that legacy of freedom continues.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love history, so that's really must be an amazing place. Next time I
Absolutely.
come to New York, I'll come and visit you guys.
Come check us out.
I would love to. So tell me, one of my favorite questions to be asked is why now? Why did I decide to write my book? So tell me, why did you decide that now is the time to write A Charge to Keep?
So I really think that this book is needed for such a time as this. And I believe that there are leaders who are in positions where they are wondering whether or not it is okay for their faith to be able to show up in their work.
Mm.
And there are also other faith leaders who, like me, have a second job, a second career, and are wondering whether or not those practices would be able to help. And so I tell people all the time that I am a much better workshop presenter because of the professional development that I have been a part of on my job. And I am a much better leader because of the ways in which I'm able to communicate and to be able to meet people where they are in the church setting. And so the premise of the book is that you don't have to check your faith at the boardroom door and you don't have to check your business acumen at the church door.
Hmm. I think that you're right. I think that we're in such an interesting time in society now where almost we were progressing so fast and people could be free and talk about, their identities and everything about them. And then we kind of had like a hit a wall and then we're going backwards now. It feels like
Absolutely.
people are so afraid. I mean, one of my favorite movies is The Zohan. And
Mhm.
it's an Adam Sandler movie who I'm not usually a big fan of his, but it's about, Israeli and the Jews and the Arabs but it's a great comedy and it's a great movie, and I think that if it was today, like this was 20 years ago, I don't think they would have been able to make it because people are so sensitive. So is this like a sensitivity? I mean, has it changed? What are your thoughts?
No, so I agree with you. And so in one of the later chapters, I talk about the need to be intentionally diverse, but I also discuss the idea that that people that have different beliefs can actually sit and reason together, that you can disagree without being disagreeable. And so we might not agree on every issue, but we actually have more in common than what we think. And that is then an opportunity and an entree for enlightened discussion to happen. So right now we're living in a time where if I disagree with you, that makes you my enemy, or you my enemy, and that's not why. Why would that be the way in which we should operate? Like people are entitled to two people can reason together and have a difference of opinion, but we don't have to be different. We don't have to be disagreeable as we disagree. And so I think that is what has changed. But I don't think that that people should feel like they can't express their thoughts, that they cannot share, and that that they should be afraid to say the thing that needs to be said for fear of retribution or consequence. And I think that is that fear of speaking up, that fear of being able to say the thing that matters. That fear grips a lot of leaders. And one of the things that I want to unmask is that leadership is lonely. It can feel like you are the only person that has ever been in this situation. It can feel like you are the only person that's ever experienced the type of pushback or being stabbed in the back or, the type of personnel issues. And like you're reaching for an answer, but you're not sure if you can tell someone because it might indicate that you are not the leader that people thought you were. And so this is a book that says, okay, you are not alone. Others have gone through this. Here is what I did. And so this is not theory. This is my lived experience. Every chapter is it has an example from church, an example from work, and it's proving these immutable lessons. And so they transcend. This is not like you have to be a faith leader to pick this book up, or you have to have a business background to pick this book up. These are real world examples. And so this is, read at your leisure. It is, I'm having a problem, so I'm just going to skip chapter 10. Okay, like that's okay because I don't want for you to feel alone. I don't want for you to feel like your thoughts aren't able to be presented, and I don't want you to feel like you are the enemy of the person with whom you're having a discussion simply because you disagree.
Yeah, I think that that's really great concept, and it is true that we forget. I mean, here in Hawaii, there's a concept called the breath of life. I don't know if you've ever been to Hawaii, but
That's
it's
beautiful.
called ha, right? And ha is where aloha comes from. And people used to put their heads to each other, and one person would breathe in, and then the other one would breathe out, and it was aloha, and then they would share their breath. And the reason that they did that is because they believed that one thing that unites all people is when we're born, we take our first breath and when we pass, we take our last. And every ah or breath between is an opportunity to share and connect with each other and the earth. And I think that that's something that is kind of what I'm hearing is like that this is a transcendental moment. It doesn't matter, if you're a Christian or you're what Muslim or whatever, you have where you are in your career path or what role you have, that there is commonality around everyone. And it's time for us to remember that we are all the same. We all
Absolutely.
breathe. Yeah.
And I've been to Hawaii. I actually didn't know that about Aloha, but now I have the makings of a sermon on the idea of the ha being a breath. But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right that that we have a commonality, and that now is the time for us to be working toward the greater good, not against one another. And so, yes, you don't have to be a Christian to pick this book up. Whatever you believe conflict is, or in change management, and being accountable to the finances, and making sure that personnel decisions aren't personal. These are things that are universal. It just so happens, as a pastor, I'm sharing, and here's how that looked in this setting, and here's how that looked in this workplace. But I think anybody would be able to find something here that is like what they are going through.
Interesting. And so, what is one tip that you can give people right now on how to navigate? I mean, I think right specifically now, there's a lot that's going on. I mean, of course, there's always a lot going on, but here in America, I have even some contractors who work for me whose spouse is federally employed, right? And they're so stressed that they're not going to be making money. It's right before Christmas. There's a lot of extra anxiety going around, and with elections. What are you telling your community, or are there some skills that people can use to help, bring down this uncertainty?
So I mean, I think it's very important for us to be able to lower the temperature.
Yeah.
And so in the book, I talk about the fact that I had a preferred candidate in 2024. I advocated hard for that candidate,
Me too.
and I made my voice known on that candidate. There were other people on my Facebook page who were not in support of that candidate, but that didn't mean that we can't be friends. It didn't mean that we cannot communicate or have other things in common. It simply meant that we didn't agree. And so, what I think we've got to dial the temperature back to be able to say that what is actually at stake here. Now, we're talking about day number, whatever it is, day number one more than it should have been, right? So, and so, like the reality is that what is at stake is not just the back pay of those persons who are working, but like we're talking about our national interest. And so, what are we really arguing about? What is really the thing? Is it that we just don't agree? Well, people don't agree all the time. Elections have consequences. And so we've got to begin to work together and reason together. And I think that's the moment. And that's certainly the thing that I'm saying to my congregation, is that we've got to begin to hear diverse ideas. And so there's a chapter about being intentionally diverse. The other side of that is that because elections have consequences, we've got to show up and we've got to vote. And so while it feels like the only time that it matters is every 4 years, and then perhaps the midterms, every 2 years, actually every local election matters. And so whether that's the dog catcher or the state education commissioner, or if it's the school board, or if it's, because the reality is that once you're elected to the school board, or once you're elected to the city council, you might aspire for more. And so you might aspire for your state congress, so your state legislature, your assembly, or your senate, depending on what it's called in your state. And so then those are the persons who are going to run for federal office. So like we're really talking about people who were once our business owner in our community, who were once our city council person. And so if you're not actively involved there, the pipeline is what is going to feed the politics for later. And look, the same thing is true in the church. And it's not exactly the same, but the concept remains that every pastor was first a layperson. And every bishop, every person that is in position of power was first sitting in the pew. And so we've got to say as a congregation that if we want better quality at that level, we've got to then be investing in the people now, because somebody somewhere passed someone along and said, I agree that they've been called and that they would make a great pastor. And so you got to be careful that that person might very well be your pastor one day, might very well be your bishop. And that city council person might very well be your candidate for president. So I'm also saying that not only do we need to turn the temperature down, but we need to be actively involved at every level, not just when it feels like the elections matter.
That's true. I think that a lot of the elections that we thought were going to go a certain way, It was because people were watching the news, and the news is, I mean, I'm in media, right? So
Mhm.
I could tell you even now with what's going on in the changes of search. Like, now we call it zero click. So I can, and it happens every day. What you see when you search is different than what I see when I search on Google. And that then is also impacting people in mass. So just because you think, oh, it's on the news, well, the news that you saw might be different than the news I saw. And the article that I read is different than the article you read. So that, it's like just, I think, really understanding that things are moving very quickly. And it is going back to our principles and beliefs. That's what everything's factored around. To say, just because we're hearing it, do we believe it? And what are we going to do about it?
Right. I think what you've described is accurate. And so when we take a step back and we think of things like confirmation bias. So what you just described is if I clicked it, then I'm going to see a lot more things like that. And so now I have in my mind that that's the thing that I want to be able to believe. And I'm living in my own echo chamber. But like, but you have to be able to distinguish whether or not what you are receiving is true or what you're receiving is someone's belief. And so, but like we live in a Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook world where the things that we see confirm for us that what we're thinking is accurate, and it could actually be wrong. I mean, look at the controversy with the Cracker Barrel logo, right? And so all these people are angry about whether or not the logo represents the best of, only to find out that it was bots that were supercharging the message to make it seem as though there were more people. And so we've seen interference in elections. We've seen interference on Facebook. Unfortunately, people have learned the algorithm back in, and they've learned how to be able to gin up support or fan flames. And sadly, it leads to the January 6th, and it leads to the other things that happen. And that's where we just have to take a step back in the room and be able to say, am I so impassioned by something that I would lead to violence? If that's the case, then I'm actually not. I need to think about how my rhetoric needs to change. And unfortunately, we didn't learn that lesson from January 6th, and so here we are.
Here we are. Wow. So, tell me, so you work with a lot of nonprofits and other, you're a business coach. What's one story you can share with us about a nonprofit that, they came to you and you helped them and how is their transformation?
Yeah, so I'm happy to tell one, and so because you said that you have a clean energy background, I'm gonna tell this story, and be interested in seeing your perspective. So I joined Greentown Labs, North America's largest incubator of climate tech startups. So organizations that are working to be able to solve the climate crisis and accelerate our reliance or I'm sorry, accelerate our movement toward clean energy. So I was there as a CFO. I joined as a CFO to support the work of the CEO. I had a conversation with the CEO when I joined. I'm not looking to take your job. I'm here to support you. And so I started in January of that year. And in March, April, she tells me that she's going to take her sabbatical. And it was a sabbatical that was planned for the pandemic. But she's coming back. And so I'm going to leave you, Kevin, and two other people in charge. And here are my directions. And she literally left almost 100 pages of directions. And I'll be back. And so great, like we're following the directions. And she calls me in August and she says, Kevin, I'm coming back. And I'm like, great, we've missed you. And she says, but I'm not going to stay. I'm going to step down and I want for you to be the interim executive. And so I'm saying, but like, this is exactly not what we talked about over lunch. Like, I'm here to be able to support you, but like, if this is your
This is not on the documentation you provided.
right, this is right, this is right. It wasn't in the 100 pages,
Right.
but so I said yes, and so I became the interim CEO in addition to being the CFO, and so during that time, I knew that the board was going to be looking for a long-term leader. And so there was going to be a national search. And so what my job, having been a CEO, having been a COO, being the CFO of this organization, My job was then not to be that leader, but to be able to give the runway in order for that person to be successful. So all of the challenge that I observed in this organization. So this was the founder that stepped down. This was the person who knew everybody's name at, employee 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and now we're at 50 employees. This is that person who stepped down, but it was not planned. I mean, it was like a shotgun marriage. Like, she said she was stepping down, and the board said, "Okay, well, who are you going to have? Here's Kevin. Okay, we'll take him." And so, like, I knew that I was under that kind of pressure, but like, I also understood that it was going to be important to set the organization up for the future. And so, one of those things is to begin to work to operationalize how we do things, and to provide consistency in our promotion practices, and consistency in our, because to scale means that you have to have the systems in place. And so, as we're looking now to transform to a nonprofit, which did happen, that in order for us to do that, we now need to be thinking differently about our approach. And so, we also need to be thinking differently about our money. And so, I'm getting to the heart of the story,
Yes.
and so sharing. So the clean energy sector believes that oil and gas is the enemy, but Greentown had a relationship with Chevron and with Shell and with others. And so we were approached by Saudi Aramco, Aramco Americas, the
All about
American
Aramco.
arm
I know, yeah, yeah.
of the
Great
largest.
Aramco stories. So yes.
And so they offered to be one of our top tier partners. And so I said yes. And so the purists were hot. I mean, I got letters, the Boston Globe, all of those things. How could you negotiate with the devil? How could you? And from my pastoral experience, I'm saying, wait, I was redeemed. Why am I not willing to be able to say that this organization has put forth $1 billion to be able to help change the climate sector? And so,
You want on your side.
that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Because look, the Bible says that that Zacchaeus was a tax collector, and not just any tax collector. He was the chief tax collectors, and tax collectors were low down and dirty. And he said, "Lord, if I have taken anything from anyone, I will restore them fourfold." What? So you're willing to say that if you wrong someone, because you have had this encounter, you are willing to then make it right? Who am I to say that this largest oil company in the world has set aside $1 billion to make it right, that I don't want to work with them?
That's
Lord,
great.
that was the end of me. And so I was dismissed from that job a few months later, when the newspaper he turned up, and again, it was the right decision. So
Wow.
fast forward to a year or so later, I'm the interim executive for a child development center in Hartford. And my successor at Greentown leaves after 9 months. And part of it was because they so upset the oil sector when they were like, well, we're going to terminate this relationship with Saudi Aramco. And like, oil and gas was like, wait a minute now, this is one of our leading. What do you mean you're going to terminate the relationship? And so 9 months later, he's out. So I'm here, and so I write an op-ed in the local newspaper, and I say, "Look, I made this decision, and I would do it again. And as a matter of fact, if Saudi Aramco wants to write us a check to be able to help the black and brown children who are in this school, who are early childhood, to grow up to be not just ready for jobs, but job creators. Oh yes, I will take the philanthropy." Now, look, I'm not saying that every check that you get, you got to cash. But I'm saying, like, I welcome the conversation. Come on, Saudi Aramco. Come on, Exxon. Come on, Shell. If you can help us to be able to make it so that children can grow up in the communities most impacted by climate change, to grow up and to be better, then I welcome that support. And so the board was like, well, wait, we don't want a court controversy. They literally brought me to a meeting and asked me, Kevin, do you have a personal stake in Saudi Aramco?
I just thought that. I was like,
My integrity is not for sale. Understand from having, because Greentown was based in Boston, but moved to Houston
as well. And so 2 locations, I understand that oil and gas has the resources. They've got the money to spend and the money to lose. They've got the wherewithal and the know-how. And if we're going to get this thing done, it's going to take us coming together.
Absolutely.
And so they said, nope, this is too much for us. You got to go. And even when I showed them that their stock portfolio that they were so proud of, that when I showed them that they are benefiting today from the dividends from oil and gas, that was still not enough to persuade them that I was wrong. So I've gotten fired twice for making a principled decision. And that was one that was rooted in my faith. And so I share, this example, not as a success story, but I share this example as part of leadership is making difficult decisions. And part of leadership is being able to sleep at night. And while I don't have those titles, I do have my integrity. And while I don't have those roles, I do have the ability to be able to say that I can call what's wrong, wrong, and I can call what's right, right. And I believe that if we are truly going to solve this thing, that it's going to take everybody at the table. So I can't say in another context, it's only going to be the Democrats. And I can't say it's only going to be the Republicans. And I can't say it's only going to be this shade of person. And no, it's going to take all of us coming together to find the common good to be the beloved community that Dr. King talked about. And so I would make that decision again. Now, look, Saudi Aramco hasn't reached out to me to offer me a job. They haven't reached out to me to be able to say, Kevin, here's a check for the trouble that you've made. That's not my issue, and that's not what I'm waiting for. I am looking to be a coach to people and to organizations who are willing to make the tough decisions. Sometimes that means scaling down. Sometimes that means growing. Sometimes that means moving out of your comfort zone in order to do something that you never thought that you would do in order to get something that you never thought that you could get. And so there is a story that is, it doesn't, nobody wants to admit that they've been fired twice for the same offense. But there's a story that is in the book and is a part of my lived experience.
Wow, that is a really great story. Have you seen Landman?
I have not.
You got to see it. Okay, so
Okay.
and it was really good. And what I really appreciated about it is that I think a lot of people out there don't even realize that oil is in everything.
Absolutely.
Everything, like hair products, clothing,
Yes.
hands, aluminum, everything has oil in it.
Yes.
And so, and I think, I went to, for me, I think I was a little, when I first got into solar, I was interested in, and I went to Texas for this Power Gen conference, and Power Gen was more about utilities. And I think it's very easy for people to say, and I hear it all the time, and I feel very, but like you, I'm someone who wants what's right, right? Or what I'll speak about what's right. They said that the utility companies are so evil, right? And they are a monopoly, sure. They were the ones who had to put the equipment in. They're the ones who had to lay these lines. And, and they're also, anyways, so I went to Power Gen, and up there, they're talking about that, just like what you're saying, that really the way that the world, in order to save the world, we need all sources. We can't just use solar. We can't just use hydrogen. We
Absolutely.
can't just use nuclear. We can't just use oil. We need all of it, or we're not going to make it. And so that we're stronger together. And I think you'll really like Landman, because it's kind of a perspective about oil that I think a lot of people don't realize. And that, what we do without them.
Right.
We couldn't even have medicine.
And the transition is not going to be overnight,
Yeah.
right? So we're not looking to be able to, we're looking to accelerate the transition, but we're never going to be able to move from it totally. And it's not going to happen tomorrow because we didn't get into this mess overnight. And so we're not going to be able to get out of it tonight. And so we've got to then work together to be able to say, how do we do it? So look, if an oil rig can be converted to be a wind tower, why not?
Or using
already done the work.
or using solar to pump the drill.
Exactly. So,
We're using, you gotta use, I mean, that's what we need, right? I mean, it's not gonna go away. Right.
It's not, and so, but we can work together to make it more efficient, to make it less taxing. But look, they've made the investment. They've got the resources, and literally, they said, what will this op-ed do to our funding from the United Way? And I'm saying, where does the United Way get its money? and maybe not locally, but certainly nationally, like the philanthropy is coming from these sources. But it's the challenge is that there's a limited view of what is required in order for the world to change. And look, I'm not trying to be the president of the United States. I'm only responsible for my one church and, in my one job and, as many coaching clients as I can have. But the point I'm making is that we can all be a part of the solution. And so what I want leaders to be able to take away from this book is you can tell the truth. Now, be clear, it might cost you, but it's better to have your integrity intact than to be able to sell your soul to the special interest that that you think is going to be the next thing to get you to where you want to be. And so how many organizations suffer because of groupthink? How many organizations suffer because no one was willing to be able to say, this is not working and we need to try something different? And if we aren't willing to have those conversations, then we are missing out on an opportunity to move in the right direction. And I think that is the critical piece.
I think that you're right. I mean, and that's what we know. And everyone, talks about that, change. No one wants to change. Well, the only thing that's not changing is you.
Right.
Everything else is changing. Everything all around you is changing. And those are the leaders that they have to get uncomfortable. And if you're not getting uncomfortable, then you're going to be out tomorrow because it's uncomfortable to be a leader.
Absolutely.
And in business and in life, I guess,
And it's
letters. Yeah. Yeah. So, tell me, I think it's really interesting. Change is constant. Okay, we're talking about here, and in both business and ministry. What are your top principles for managing change while maintaining stability?
So I think, I devote this whole chapter to change management. One of the mistakes that leaders make is wanting to go too fast instead of going together. And another mistake that they make, in my experience, is when people begin to push back, that they think that means that that's evidence that they've made the wrong choice. And so sometimes the pushback is actually evidence that you're doing the right thing. And so, we talked about the Cracker Barrel example a minute ago, and the Cracker Barrel logo did not change so significantly. It wasn't the real people complaining, it was the bots. And so the bots were feeding people's, as you said, feeding people's inboxes, and the news that they were seeing is that how terrible it is, the correlation is.
Or that's cool.
And it's just, but okay, but like they are just trying to be, not hip and cool, but like to change the logo to attract more customers. Like it was not a wrong thing for them to consider. Pepsi changes its logo like every 2 or 3 years.
Kia, everyone changed their logo. Starbucks has changed it 4 times.
Starbucks, exactly right. I mean, Microsoft.
Oh.
So it's not. So that's not it, right? That's not the issue. But in the book, I describe a lesson that I learned from Dr. Dolly Chung at NYU, who told us that if you take 100% of anything, that when you're looking to be able to make change, that there are 20% of the people who are going to go with you, and there are 20% of the people who are going to be against you, that there are 60% of the people who can be convinced. And so when you are talking about the change that you want to be able to implement, it's important to understand that you are not just talking to the naysayers, you're talking to the 60% who can be convinced either way. And so what you can do is use the 20% who are going to be for you as ambassadors to the 60%. And maybe there's 1 or 2 of the people who are pushing against it that you can convert to be but if you don't do that, if you don't think that way, you're actually going to get stuck. So President Obama tells the story of when they were looking to pass the ACA. And so they came to a particular Republican senator and said, what's wrong? What we can do to get your vote? Well, this needs to change. And of course, they go and they change that, and they bring the person back and they say, okay, well, what is it going to take to get your vote now? And he said, well, if you change this thing. And so they go back and they change this. And he says, are you even going to change this? And the senator basically said, no, I'm just not going to change my vote. And so so we're running a fool's errand.
We are going after someone and their vote for something that they were never going to vote for in the first place. And in organizations and in churches, there are just people who are not going to go along with
The
the
negative
vote.
Nancy's.
And that negative Nancy perhaps has reached the end of her useful useful life in your organization or in your church, and that's okay. But what we want to do is that we want to, oh my God, that negative Nancy, she has so much institutional knowledge, and if she were to go, the organization would crumble. And if she were not, and sometimes it's like, okay, maybe that's actually what we need in order for us to be able to move forward. So in terms of managing change, I think it's important to remember that paradigm that there are 60% of the people who can be convinced, and also to understand that in that 20% who are pushing against you, some of them are grieving the status quo and are grieving the possibility that what they have come accustomed to is not necessarily going to work in their favor. And like that grieving process is hard, but it's a necessary step to achieve the focus that you want. So if we go back to Greentown for just a second, I'm leading and I'm saying we need to have predictable windows for promotions. Like it just can't happen every 3 months. And like we can't sit in the room and say, who do we think has a promotion now? And they've been here for 2 years. It's about time. No, like there need to be criteria. There need to be a predictability because people are coming now who don't know the organization and they've left places where there was predictability. We need to build that. And so it can't be, and you get a promotion and you get a promotion, Oprah style promotions. But the people who have been socially promoted, oh, they didn't like that. No, because they benefited from a system where their longevity was what was the currency to be able to have power. And so Kevin is not talking about that. Kevin is talking about, some steps to where people can make it. And we don't like that. So he's got to go. And so like the Saudi Aramco thing was just the thing that was publicly easy. But it was more about creating the type of change internally that would enable us to be able to scale and to get to what we say we want. And
Yep.
that is to accelerate the pace of change.
It is. I started reading a book, 4D. Have you ever heard this?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's this 4D. It's like this, business book, and I was recommended by another person on the podcast. I'm reading it right now, and I think it's really interesting because they talk about very similar things that you're saying. That there's, these people who are the champions. Whenever there's an idea, two different ways you can make change. It's like a pen stroke, right? Like you need more. You're investing in new technology. You're investing in a person. You're getting new equipment, whatever it is. Or there's the long-term change that everyone's got to be committed to of how you're doing business, how you're reporting, how you're, customer service. What is that like one thing that you're really, 80% of your day is going to be used on just regular business. And what's that like really important rock, like the Rockefeller rock that you're going to hold on to? But I thought it was interesting. They told a little story that thing with leaders is just like you're saying, that they have to be committed, fully committed, right? So it's like if you have a child and you say, okay, you let your daughter use the car as long as she washes it every Saturday.
Mhm.
And a couple weeks go by and you see that, every Saturday you walk out there and the daughter got the car and you see that it's clean. And you said, yes, you can use it this weekend. But then you go on a vacation or you go on a business trip and you're gone for a Saturday or two. And then you come back and the car doesn't look so good. You're like, well, what happened to the car? Oh, we're still doing that? Yes, we're still doing that. Right. It was like, and I thought that was really telling to me of because I'm a leader too. And I've also been like, I'm called not lazy, but you get there's so many things that go on. It's like, you're like, oh, am I really committed to this concept of what we're of this one thing? And before you make change, you got to make sure that you really are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the 60% will be like, everyone will go back to not washing the car.
Or I've heard you say this so many times that like, I just, I'll pretend, but like, I'll go along to get along, but like, I actually don't, you're not going to enforce it. So I don't really have to move forward on it. And I think you're absolutely right. I think your story, is an apt one. And how many organizations have committed to, ensuring that the daughter washed the car, that the organization, followed its DEI practices, or the organization followed its as a result of people just saying, that other things creeped in, and now you're dealing with a mess and you don't know why. You don't recognize that it's your own indecision that was a decision,
That's right.
and as a result, the organization is suffering.
That's exactly right. I think that that's so true. And it's kind of like when people say, I heard the other day where I was watching a podcast and someone said, you know, people think, oh, I'm just not very confident. Well, you're confident in that.
Mhm.
You're confident in
Absolutely.
telling me that you're not confident,
Right.
right? It's the same kind of thing. It's like, well, I'm not good at making decisions. Well, that's a decision that you've made.
You've made that decision. Exactly.
So it's like, let's, do what we say and say what we do and really be as I think that's the most important thing with leaders is to really make sure that, before you make a decision that you're gonna be fully committed and see it all the way to the end.
Exactly. And not to get scared just when, something goes wrong. Your daughter says, well, I'm not doing that. Okay, well, like then you're not doing it.
Yeah,
Like,
we're the
okay, like, right.
It's another book I loved is Amy Duke and it's Living in Bets. I'm not sure if you read
Okay.
that. She's a professional poker player, and what I loved about it is that she says in poker, unlike chess, chess there's always a right way to go.
Mhm.
Right. In poker, you could have the best hand but still lose because there's
Mhm.
probability and you never know. You could be lucky or not lucky. You just never it's everything's probability. And what a lot of leaders and people do is that they're making, if she goes to boardroom and she says, okay, tell me the, biggest mistake or your highest
Mhm.
high as a leader and lowest low.
Right.
Well, the lowest lows are always that, and they're always judging themselves based off of the result, the
Right.
outcome. But that doesn't mean that they made a bad decision.
Right.
The outcome wasn't what they had wanted it to be. But
Right.
and then they say, oh, it was a bad decision, but it wasn't a
Mhm.
bad decision.
It wasn't.
With the information that they had at the time, it was the right decision and the outcome wasn't right. So I think we should all just be a little kinder to ourselves and, say, be frank. The probability, I feel pretty confident, 80%, but no matter what happens, COVID could hit. Whatever could happen, happens. Right. And it might be right in the middle of your launch. And that doesn't mean that you made a bad decision.
So I couldn't agree more. And in the book, one of the tools that I'm most proud of is called the recommendation chart, where you lay out all of the principles and all of the pros and the cons, and you give the leader the opportunity to make a decision with the best information that they have available. It is then written and can be saved someplace that can then be pulled out for the conversation about whether or not it went right or went well. Because when memories fade and when the people who were involved in the decision weren't are no longer at the table to be able to give the historical context, then you have something written down that says, and this is the information that I had. And so, given the information that I had, I made this choice. And maybe it's not the choice that I would make if I had different information, but given what I knew, it is the choice that I made. But as a leader, you've got to live with those consequences. And some of them will be good and some of them will be bad. And so when it came to Saudi Aramco, okay, we knew that there was going to be controversy, but what we weighed was the bigger advantage was to be able to say that we are working with the largest oil producer to turn this situation around.
I mean, that's like big press. I mean, I get like chills thinking about it. Like that's like a big accomplishment.
I thought so, but and a lot of people in the sector felt that way too.
Well,
But
but you got a great story out of it.
no, a great story. And look, I also had months of unemployment and pronounced financial challenge. But the reality is that even with that, I would still do it again.
Yeah. Well, I think this has been a really, really great podcast. They're so interesting. Tell my reader or listeners, how can they, get a copy of your book? How can they learn more about you?
Absolutely. So I'm happy to share my website, which is revkttaylor.com. And so there you can learn about me. There's a page devoted entirely to the book. And you can buy the book right there. If those of you who are on Amazon and wish to be able to get a copy of the book, we are available on Amazon. It will get to you with your purchase. The thing that I would ask your listeners to do is that once they've gotten a chance to get to know me, to visit my LinkedIn, and you can get to my LinkedIn and my Facebook from the website, and for your listeners to review the book. I think you and I both know from a media space that that it is the reviews and is the customer feedback and is the buzz that not only drives excitement, but also can help move the needle on sales. And I want to be very clear that I want for this to be a New York Times bestseller. But what I want more than that is I want for people to see themselves in the book and to be able to use it as a resource, and then to think of me when they are thinking of a consulting agreement, or when they're thinking of like, who can I come in to both keynote, and who can run my retreat, who can talk to me and to be able to help my leaders to be able to develop the type of courage that it's going to take for us to actually plan the next 10 years of where this organization is going to go. I want for them to think of me. And so as you are doing work in the clean energy sector, I hope that my story resonated and that you keep it at the top of your mind. And when somebody says to you, who's going to be the one who can come in and help us to be able to activate the change, you know what? I know of a person who's not afraid of saying what's right. That's what I'm hopeful that you see as you go to the website. And I'm hopeful that that your listeners will agree to as well.
That's really wonderful. And then in our YouTube version of this, the
Mm.
visual podcast, we're going to have all your social media handles
Great.
well in the bottom there. So everyone can just go ahead and click on those. And I want to thank you so much for being here. I think you're so easy
Thank
to
you.
talk to. And I think you would be a great choice for a keynote speech or anything,
Thank
really.
you. I appreciate
you-
that. So kind of you.
Thank you so much for all my listeners for being here. We are just approaching 60,000 subscribers on YouTube, and it is because of you and your aloha. So please continue to share this content, like it, so I can continue to get great guests like Reverend Kevin Taylor. And I will see you next week in the Pixels. Aloha. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Covert Code Podcast. If you're loving the insights we share here, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review. Your support helps us reach more digital innovators like you. Share this episode with your friends and colleagues on social media and help spread the word. And if you're in the solar space or just curious about where clean energy is headed, I'm thrilled to announce my brand new podcast, The Solar Coaster. This show digs into the real stories, trends, and challenges of the solar industry, with bold conversations and powerful takeaways you won't hear anywhere else. Follow the Solar Coaster now so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for tuning in. See you in the pixels. Aloha.